let us go to the last topic of this panel, which is the topic of violence. Violence is a public health problem. The main cause of death, as Dr. Medina Mora reminds us, in the Mexican population for men between 15 and 29 years old. But in addition to that, this is a phenomenon that, in addition to causing mortality, it has social effects. What can you tell us about the size of the problem, levels and trends, and how can we approach this to avoid its consequences? Well, we know that violence is increasing. We're highly concerned. It mainly affects the young population. It has these consequences on mental health, depression, suicide. But it also affects mainly the replication of violence. That is to say, how exposure to violence replicates new cases of behavioral problems. So we would have to approach this from different stances. Now, doing this with the University of California gives us another opportunity. We also know that there is a drug problem, but it affects differently to Mexico and the U.S. Mexico has a much more serious structural problem related to drug trafficking, production, and distribution. The U.S. has consumption problems more than Mexico, but nonetheless we share some common problems, and therefore we have the same topic, which is different for both countries, but it helps working together. The problem of consumption of heroin in Mexico is low, but Tijuana has one of the highest indexes of consumption of heroin in Mexico, and it shares that problem with the United States. And there we are seeing a lot of research and investigation that allows us to see how it is that we can approach the topic and its relationship with AIDS. In the case of Mexico and California, we see less cases of AIDS, but more mortality. So this leads us to think and understand what's happening. We have intrafamily violence, which is a common problem. We have the migrant population problem, which is also a very huge challenge in the sense that we have to see this as a binational problem. That is to say, migrants in the United States have problems, but migrants that come back in the pre-Trump age suffered more violence in Mexico than in the United States. And this is the problem of the separation of families with the migration of parents and children. They stay in the United States because, as you say, they are Mexicans, or when they do not come back, they are with this continuous anguish. Perhaps when they go back home after school, they are not going to see their parents again because they were sent back to Mexico. And the consequences of what we have studied in these binational studies are quite dramatic in terms of the development of these families and children. And our returned migrants, they don't belong to any of the two countries anymore. They are children who no longer speak Spanish, so schooling is a very important factor for them. So we have this huge opportunity now of working together with a topic that has different alternatives of solution, but different possibilities to work together. Arms also is a very important topic, and in both countries, youth is highly affected. Young people who are in the mid-age, productive age, who died with greater frequency than other population. And we have to change our focus and concentrate on this population. And this is a concern for both countries that offers opportunities of collaboration between countries. There are solution alternatives which have been very effective. We have worked in studies for behavioral problems with children, which are highly effective. We have worked with Latino populations in Mexico and the United States, and they have given us very important change opportunities, and there are many alternatives. Now we have to work how we can work together and how we can go from personal intervention interventions to group interventions, and then give structural responses that will allow both countries to better tackle our problems. We have seen in Mexico a phenomenon which is similar to the maratruchas in Central America. Do you think so? Well, what we do have in Mexico is this issue of gangs. We have violence, the replication of violence, as well as the possibilities of working with young people. And I think that this is one of the great challenges that we are facing both sides of the border. Is there a cause-effect, a relationship between drugs and violence? Well, it has several dimensions. Violence and drugs. I mean, not all violence relates to drugs, and that's something that we have to understand. Drugs definitely are a very important branch of organized crimes, but this is not the only branch. We also have people trafficking, which is also a very important topic, and like of TIP, and when cocaine trafficking has been reduced in both countries, then this is generated increase in other type of organized crime activities like trafficking in people. Drugs, of course, generated money and power. So there is a relationship. We also see the relationship of violence under intoxication and the violence that exists with legal consumption. And I also think that there might be a difference between the California and Mexico policies can give us perspectives of making important structural changes to learn. And I think that we will soon have good marijuana from the United States, which is being trafficked to Mexico. We have Mexican peasants making money in the United States. I mean, we have all those structural problems, so we have to clearly understand so as not to get lost in those dimensions. And how we can do that well is working in collaboration, working with youth, because youth is affected. They are the victims. They don't have opportunities of development. They are affected by organized crime, and therefore we have to change the situation in these groups to allow us to give them different perspectives. And we will have to identify new structural alternatives for the topic of drugs. You mentioned in the summary that you sent that the research made by you and other groups show that migrants increase the use of substances, and therefore there is a higher presence of mental diseases. Well, Dr. Guillermo Borges and we have brought the three of us together. What we have seen is we have seen the Mexican population migrates to the United States with less mental health problems and with a lower level of drug consumption, and a lot of this population remains in a good mental condition in the United States, but after being for some time in the United States, and if they have a lot of problems in their environment, they start to develop drug problems and also mental health problems. And the second generation in the United States faces more problems of mental health than the U.S. population. It is above the average. So we are facing that migration phenomenon that changes the topic when this population comes back to Mexico. That population comes back with all those healthcare needs. And if we cannot provide them the care, then we generate more problems related to mental health diseases. Vis-a-vis the case of California. In California, they have much more suicides. Violence is expressed more as suicides, and here as homicides. We see much more homicides in Mexico than in the U.S., and much more suicides there than homicides. So this makes us reflect on the manifestations and how we have to establish joint prevention actions and prevent both homicides and suicide. But this explains how the cultural differences and the type of diseases that we are seeing.